Once again, good morning everyone. Here is the topic of our reporting about globalization, environmental and ecological concerns. Here are some of the topics that we will tackle. Begin with modernization, global environmental flows, global climate change, other environmental problems such as issues that happen today due to climate change, and global responses. What is the action that we are going to take? Solution. And finally, we talk about collapse. If we did not take response or ignore the situation, what are the things that will happen? And now let us read to you our abstract of this particular report. Throughout the history, countries have a lot in common and share the same atmosphere, such as accumulation of greenhouse gases, which can constitute threat to the world today. This is part of the process called global environmental flows. Within the sphere of globalization, modernization gives a significant impact on the many aspects on the environmental problems, with ecological economics having been advanced in years. This paper offers and explores the issues of ecological concern, such as creation of climate refugees and what can be done to change the situation, which we call as global response. In this context, the environment and globalization are connected by ecological processes whose impact travels beyond national boundaries and environmental problems, which poses challenges that are not limited to a given country. Importantly, globalization and environment intersect at 3 points: economy, knowledge, and governance. For instance, countries get connected because of economic reasons and environmental consumption needs and nature conservation, which influence the sustainable development. In reality, many population getting attracted to cities. The negative effects of this trend are being felt, especially the natural environment. Of great significance is the fact that cities are the leading consumers of energy and contribute to the greenhouse gases emitted into atmosphere. This has widely led to what commonly known as climate change. In fact, to fight ecological collapse, everyone is part of the ecosystem. Thus, we can take steps as environmental friendly users. Here are some of the keywords that we highlighted as we report in this particular topic, which include modernization, global environmental flows, climate change, global response, and collapse. When we talk about globalization and environment, it is a very important relationship. As we knew in the very beginning, globalization is a process of becoming globally integrations of markets and even product and services, culture, economics, politics, science and technology, and even environment that goes globally as nations. Everything flows because we interconnected with one nation and with another nation. So when we talk about environment, it includes surrounding, everything around us, the creatures, the natural and man-made that create ecological society. So eventually, through this relationship, either in bad situation or in positive effect, when we globalize as a nation, we receive the effect, either is positive or negative. So let's look about this example about how the world is interconnected, especially when we talk about the environment. When one country started to have increase of modernization, such as people starting to move from agriculture and then they move onward to modernization, then it become more and more people in the city. It become overpopulation. When we become overpopulation, then more and more industry is increased, and the increase of transportation and all these things, it will create negative impact, but there are also positive impact. That's why environmental and globalization is interconnected. It is already become a global chain. And one of the example that we can see is that the free trade that is so central nowadays to economic globalization from a neoliberal perspective is generally seen as enemy. When they talk about how a free country can do what they want, but they do not concern about the environment. So one of the example can be ecological modernization theory, which some of the sociologists they used to critique. But let's look deeper on this. So before we go into the theory, we need to understand what is modernization. What comes to our mind when we think about modernization? So it's basically an transformation of a process of life from the agriculture to the modern era. People tend to move from province in order to live a better and comfortable life in the city. So the increase of urbanization because people are moving from the province to the city and people getting more and more involved in technologies in terms of producing, manufacturing, technology at once. So the impact also to the environment is highly affected, especially when come to pollution due to some of the increasing of industrial phases. So now we can look deeper what is actually ecological modernization theory. According to our research, it is an assumed that existing environmental problems can be internalized by political, economic, and social institutions and can care for sustainability. Meaning that even though there are problems in environment that arises because of globalization, because of people moving from the province to the city, um, the changes of processes from industrial before it is more on farming, agriculture, but people are more on technology, more on industrial phases. But according to this theory, there can be internalized. So some of the example can be introduce of policy, introduce the discourse of environmental sustainability can be outlined as follow, such as the policy that implement by the government, such as some of the act of saving water plan, the 3R policy, reuse, recycle, and reduce, to reduce resources used such as trash to protect the environment. This is to emphasis on technologies as key drivers of change. And as we look deeper on this theory, we can be introduced by this graph as we see that when the environmental degradation means pollution, when pollution get higher, It is also because of economic development. But because of economic development through the industrial economic. But according to this environmental kindness curve, there will be a turning point where there will be policymakers. There are some solutions that we can do in order to minimize the pollution that happen. And one of the example can be Ecomall, a place to save the earth. Eco-friendly users, all of us can take a step. And this Ecomall is actually a place where they trying to emphasize more and more people and consumers to become a green consumerism, that they can buy instead of plastic, but they have some substitute item for them in this mall in order to save the earth, to save the environment. So this is one of the example to support a more sustainable future. And according to Jane Goodall, it's up to us to save the world. For tomorrow, it's up to you and me. All of us take the responsibility. When we talk about environmental flow, it simply defines as the quantity, timing, and quality of the flow of water which support the fresh water and the ecosystem, which is the demand of human beings through water supply and even the food supply chain, because everything that is in the flow, everything affects our livelihood. The river ecosystem consists of the living system. Our body has Mother Earth, movement of fishes, animals, coral reef, plants, water quality, food supply, biodiversity, livelihood, and even sustainability. So why it is called environmental flow? Because through human action, there are always conflict within human objective and environmental objective. Due to economic development, many tend to increase of industrial phases, such as building of factories near the sea, near the rivers, and all the toxic that or chemicals that come out from the factories eventually affects the ecosystem or the pollution. That is why it is interconnected. Once pollution happen, animals, coral reefs, plants, and even fishes, it will be declined. As we understand on earlier on, the environmental flow definition is more on quality, quantity, and the river flow in the ecosystem. As we can see in this graph, the flow of water, the concepts and the method, how the habitat and the ecosystem are affected and connected with each other. Because the habitat and the biodiversity have its own life history patterns, which includes migration, spawning, emergence. One of the example is during the flash flood or disaster that happened due to climate change and many other environmental problems such as pollution. All these affects the environmental flow, because a good water flow system eventually increase the food chain, such as increases of fish and river supply and many more. But if the river flow does not go well, such due to certain pollution or disaster that happen like typhoon or flash flood, eventually the ecosystem affected, and the biodiversity is also affected. So this is how this graph show the pattern of its cycle, and we can conclude that environmental flow is due to human development, and everything begins with climate change, and all of this affects the environmental flows, either in a positive effect or negative effect, because all the pollution, toxic and chemicals, it affects the life of the river ecosystem and eventually affects the livelihood of human beings. Now we move on the topic on global climate change. How humans modify the environment. Many would ask, is it the same with global warming? Then what is climate change? In general, climate change is a global phenomenon of climate transformation. It is characterized by the changes in the usual climate of the planet. This includes the increasing of temperature, precipitation, and wind that is especially caused by human activities. According to the US Geological Survey, global warming is just one aspect of climate change. In fact, they said that global warming refers to the rise in global temperatures due mainly to the increasing concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. On the other hand, climate change refers to the increasing changes in the measures of climate over a long period of time, including precipitation, temperature, and wind patterns. Officially speaking, climate change is a global phenomenon of climate transformation. It is characterized by the changes in the usual climate of the planet. NASA's definition of climate change said it is a broad range of global phenomenon created predominantly by burning fossil fuels, which add heat trapping gases to Earth's atmosphere. These phenomena include the increased temperature, then described by global warming, but also encompass changes such as rising of sea level, melting of ice in Antarctica and Antarctic and mountain glaciers worldwide, shifts in flower, plant blooming, and extreme weather events. On another hand, global warming relates with carbon dioxide, retaining more heat from solar radiation, leading to an increase in an air temperature, following the same line of thought. According to climate, global warming refers only to the Earth's rising surface temperature, while climate change includes warming and the side effect of warming like melting of ice, heavier rainstorm, or more frequent drought. Ultimately, this means that global warming is one side of much larger problem of human-caused climate change. Now let us talk about the causes of climate change. The causes of climate change includes basic human activities such as generating power, industrial activities, usage of electricity, overconsumptions, deforestation, producing food chains, increase of transportations. Let us look on the pictures that show on this slideshow as I simply explain how it causes climate change. As we look at this picture, we know that it is from the factories. So has the demand of human being increasing, and has what I mentioned earlier on about modernization, more and more people transform their life from agriculture to industrial phase. So more and more factories are developed because of economic development. So all these factories comes out all the pollution, toxic chemicals, burning fuels, which is badly affected the weather change because of the increasing of chemicals and carbon dioxide. So next is the causes that we can see in this picture, how deforestation because of producing such as like the consumption of papers. So there are a tendency to produce more and more, manufacture more and more, and people tend to cut down trees or even to develop lands in order to get the land. So this is when less of tree, more of carbon dioxide, our temperature as a whole will increase. Because when less and less trees, especially in the city, we can see this, the temperature are far beyond from the province. But nowadays, when the province is also being affected due to deforestation because of certain development, changes of weather, it's unpredictable. And next we will talk about the causes such as increase of transportation. As you all know that urbanization, people from the province move to the city, and more people because of work, they travel, some even just one car, one person. So all these create transportation, create traffics, and when traffics come, pollution and carbon dioxide also develop, and all this create climate change. And as we go to the next picture, we see the generating power. Have more and more industrial phases comes out through the development and manufacturing, generating power also increasing. All those is included in the renewable sources that is also give a very big impact to the environment. And we can see on the following picture the manufacturing of products such as high density, such as steel, metal in the big factories. All these things involve burning fossils and fuels, which is highly destroy the environment. And as we continue to see in this picture, we can see the increasing of trash. When the increasing of population, the consumption and the extra consumption such as trash and overused material will also develop climate change, because all this, if we did not have a proper order of recycle or proper disposal, then it would cause great trouble for the environment that surrounds us. And this is also another scene that we can see because of producing foods, producing crops. We need machines, we need trucks in order to to cultivate a better crops. So we need all this, and all this eventually affects the climate change because of the the fuel that used to develop these activities, and also the fishermen and the seafarers who are catching fish for the supply of food chain. Because of the generators, the machines, all those things are create a big impact to the climate change because of the generating powers. So all these things are how humans modify the environment. Loss of biodiversity because of all these generating powers. The habitats, especially in the sea or even in land or even in the forest, everything are affected. All the animals tend to move away from their original shelf places because they know that they can no longer live there. So eventually loss of diversity and spread of diseases because of all this pollution. It become more and more unpredictable disease that come because of pollution, skin diseases, and many other consequences that happen. And we include also the rising of sea level when there are unpredictable disaster that happen due to the increase of temperature. And all these things eventually affects the food chain supply through our everyday resources and food cycle. Many would say the climate is changing. Why aren't we? We need to take steps in order to solve all these problems. So as we go deeper on how all these consequences of climate change, I will pass this slide to Sister Lorraine to explain deeper from her research and analysis.
Sea level rise and increase in the level of world's ocean due to the effect of global warming. Global warming is one of the causes sea levels rise because burning fossil fuel releases carbon dioxide and other heat-trapping gases into the atmosphere. Well, there are two ways of major case. First, glacier and ice shield worldwide are melting and adding water to the ocean. And second, the volume of the ocean is expanding as the water warms. According to my research in 2020, the global sea level set a new record high, 91.3 millimeter, 3.6 inches above 1993 levels. The rate of the sea level rise is accelerating. It has more than doubled from 0.06 inches to 1.4 millimeters per year throughout most of these 20 centuries to 0.14 inches, 3.6 millimeters per year from 2006 to 2050. The problems of the rising of the sea levels is the one of the most is the high temperature, and because of this high temperature the water of the ice got melt, and it causes also the problem of a flood. And because of this problem of a flood, the agriculture also got affected because the agriculture the soil got became salt and contaminated, and because of that there is also problem of habitat losses, and it also cause other problems like moisture of the water became like a rising. It became a typhoon or storm, and this is the one of the causes that we are facing now in the problem of the rising of the sea level.
The terms of biodiversity comes from biological diversity, understood as the variety of the living things that inhabit the planet. Its different level of a biological organization and their respective genetic variability, as well as the natural pattern present in ecosystem. As well, according to my research on the topic of loss of biodiversity, it says compared to Australia, which recorded a biodiversity loss of between 5 to 10 pieces of the total global decline. The study published in Nature found in Indonesia had absolutely in the highest number of the declined pieces, representing around 21% of the total declined during the period of 2017. In addition, biodiversity loss can have a significant direct human health impact if ecosystems services are no longer adequate to meet social needs.
Indirect changes in ecosystem service affect livelihood, incoming and local migration, and on occasion may even cause or worsen the political conflict.
Biodiversity. Biodiversity is not only as what we think plants, oceans, rivers, but it is more than that. It is also living things that is in the ocean and also in the forest, and most of that this time are declining, like pandas, giraffe, elephants, and other things. Why those things are lost? Because it is one of the things of human work. We cut the trees, we make a lot of changes, houses or buildings or factories, and we cut all the things, and so these animals also dying because they didn't have a house. And other things like a temperature, it also one of the part of the population, and also overly exploitation. Yes, this is how we need to preserve. By without care, you cannot see next generation. Threats to the food security. Food security is the measure of the individual's ability to access food that is nutritious and sufficient in quality. Food could be seen as the most basic of all human rights. However, the main threats to the food security are world population growth, the increased demands for food price, the vanishing of the variety of agricultural plant species, the increasing in the area of the shortage water, and the limitation of the availability of the land, and the food losses and the food waste.
Threats of food security. We can see in the hotels or restaurants, we who eat, or even in the restaurant, the end of the day they're throwing food because there is a leftover food that they cannot serve tomorrow, so they throw. And because of this food quality control, and even in our houses or like that, we tend to throw rather to share to the others. So this is how we also waste the food in our daily life. The suffering is that the developing countries and the poor countries.
Warming and health. Global warming is expected to adversely affect health in a number of different ways. Hot temperature increase the ozone concentration, which can damage people's lungs tissue.
and cause complications for asthma patients and those with lung diseases. Increased global warming can also pose a threat to national security, affecting food security, which in turn can lead to source conflict. Climate change affects the social and environment determinants of health, clean air, most frequently, and severe weather.
Global warming and health. High temperature is not longer fall only into sickness, but worsen many types of disaster, including storm, uh, heat wave, flood, high death rate, high wildlife vanishing rates, and more acidic in ocean and high sea level. This is becoming more problems because it became more hotter. The weather became hotter and hotter.
The destruction of natural habitats. The problem destruction of natural habitats is the result of human activity. A variety of natural habitats, for example, forests, wetland, coral reefs, the ocean bottom are facing destruction. The burning of all of those fallen trees releases large amount of carbon dioxide, which flow around the globe, contributing to the global warming. The loss of the forest leads to other problems for humans, including the loss of timber and other raw materials. It is also of great concern, especially in the area undergoing deforestation, because forests providing us with so-called ecosystem service such as protecting our watershed, protecting soil against erosion, constituting essential steps in the water cycle that generate much of our rainfall, and protecting habitat for most terrestrial plant and animal species.
By the destruction of natural habitat, we are facing many causes of habitat losses, including land conversions for the development for the growing population, mining for the materials, harvesting lumber for paper's product, and of course, agriculture.
Decline of fish. Overfishing means catching marine creatures faster than they can produce, and because of that, the fish population have declined. Many freshwater fish, especially having declined by 76% in the last than 50 years around the world. Migratory freshwater fish numbers are dropping fast than before. In the world's ocean, marine life becoming great demand because of overfishing. Without seafood, more people would need to rely on meat for protein, but livestock can only be real at the great cost. And with great demand to the environment, with the temperature rising fast than ever, fish will even quickly get left behind real terms and struggle to survive. However, the major cause of the decline of the fish because of human cooperate in the dissemination of the marine's life in the industrial fishing. The techniques used in fishing become then much more industrial and invasive.
Decline of fish. We more and more
improve our skill in fishing and our nets. Fishing became industrial. It is no longer a question of family, but it is industrial and technology. According to studies worldwide, 80% commercial fish stock have been declined because it is overly exploited or fully exploited. Our intensive fishing sacrifices millions stock of fish that are more waste because the reject that catch off or just because the fish crush to death in our nets. So how we want to preserve our fish? Decline in fresh water. Water scarcity closely related to water stress or water crisis is the lack of fresh water resource to meet the standard water demand. Two types of water scarcity have been defined: physical or economic water scarcity. Indeed, habitats loss is the major cause of declining freshwater species population as lake, river and waterland across the world continues to be obstructed, fragmented, polluted and damaged. Moreover, when water runs dry, people cannot get enough to drink, wash or feed crops, and economic. In addition, inadequate sanitation, a problem for 2.4 billion people, can lead to deadly diarrheal disease, cholera, and typhoid fever, and other waterborne illness. Decline of fresh water. Fresh water usually used for drinking, cooking, bathing, and life sustenance. Not only us humans who need this fresh water, but also the plants and animals, especially in agriculture. According to the studies, though we are surrounded by 70% of our water, but only 25% of it are fresh water. The rest of it are only saline and ocean-based water. So we need to save now and not waiting for the last drop. Paradox of bottled water produce a huge amount of trash. This contributes nearly 1.5 million tons of plastic waste per year and takes around 450 years to break down. There has been a numerous growth in the global destruction and sale of bottled water, which commands relatively high price. Bottled water is usually too expensive for the poorest people in the world, who are often the most in need of it. Bottled water is often shipped in from distant locals at great cost and with profoundly negative effect on the environment. All sorts of environment problems are related to the huge amount of fuel used by the aeroplane and ship that transport them. From treating and bottling the transportation and refrigeration, bottled water require large amount of energy. In fact, bottled water produced in the United States used 4 billion pounds, 1.8 billion kg of plastic in 2016 alone. Addition of millions of tons of slowly decomposing plastic bottle to our landfills is causing them to fill up rapidly. When plastic degrades, toxic chemical in the plastic are released in environment. Yes, it is worse, but this is truth. Plastic, especially the water bottles, are not biodegrade as fast as a natural food. At this time, we are easily buying mineral water because we can easily buy whenever we feel thirst, and easily it is handy, we can easily bring. And even the soft drink, everything using water bottle, unlike before they're using glass, like a coke, everything they use a glass, but now they're using plastic because it's handy, it's not breakable. And even like this dishwash, they're using plastic bottle. We are keep on buying those things and use, but sometimes we are fail to see how the environment, especially in the future, how we will save. Toxic chemicals. A toxic substance in a substance that can be poisonous or cause health effect. Various industries, especially the chemical industry, manufacture or release into the air, soil, oceans, lakes, and rivers many toxic chemicals. Warm temperatures increase our exposure to toxic chemical temperature affect how chemicals behave. High temperature can allow certain chemicals to vaporize more easily and entering air we breathe. Temperatures on Earth can also encourage the breakdown of some chemicals into toxic byproducts. The large contribution to the predict anthropogenic climate change rising from the burning of fossil fuel that generate carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas. Increasing in CO2 concentration will not only influence climate but also the acidity of the oceans. Toxic chemical harm people's animals, plants, weather, and it end up in the ground, sea, river, and in air. And some toxic such like a mercury, and it lead persist in the environment for many years and accumulate over and over time. And because of this, toxic observe fish and other prey, and human and wildlife got affected because we eat them. Population growth. Human population growth impacts the Earth system in a variety of ways, including increasing the extension of resources from the environment. Population grows in the increase in the number of people in a population or in dispersed group. Global human population growth amounts to around 83 million annually, or 1.1% per year. The global population has grown from 1 billion in 1800 to 7.9 billion in 2020. If the population is grow rapidly, far outpacing the ability of our planet to support it, given current practice. Overpopulation is associated with a negative impact to the environment because of that is economic of coming of range, the impact of over farming, deforestation because of building houses, factories, and also water pollution, and also eutrophication and global warming. And another effect of this is another things is that is a pollution, population in size of death in birth, immigration and immigration. It means that the more people increase more demands of food, water, housing, energy, healthcare, transportation, and more. But this population growth changes during this time of pandemic. And let us see what is that. Here there is a changes of graph of population happen during pandemic. Has been much speculation about the impact that COVID-19 has had on population changes across the country since the pandemic began in the early part of 2020. According to my research, accelerated migration, less immigration, few births, and more deaths. The next topic will be discussed by Sister Judith.
Global response. In the last two parts of our report, we presented what we are experiencing in the age of globalization and the environment problems, and a glimpse of what might happen to the future generation. We all know that environment is the foundation and the support of human existence and survival and the guarantee of sustainable human development. Environmental protection has undoubtedly become a common understanding and development strategy of all countries of the world. Now humankind is striving into the historical process of post-industrial social and is trying to reach rebalance with the environment in later stage of development. All countries need to perform respective duties and obligations in environment governance. In joint efforts to play economic development, social progresses, and environment protection to realize mutual wins and sustainable development of the world, and to create an earth homeland for harmonious coexistence of humankind and environment. This leads to the important concept of sustainable development. Before we talk about sustainable development, I want us to be enlightened by Pope Francis' deep concern and in the spiritual level of care for our common home. 7 years ago, Pope Francis promulgated Laudato Si, or care for our common home, the first ever encyclical devoted to the environment, leaving many Christians with the same question: why care about the environment? More importantly, why waste time on a document about environments where human beings face far more important issues? For Pope Francis, the answer is simple: we are all interconnected. Exploiting God's creation for short-term profit doesn't just hurt the trees or rivers, hurt natural resources, it hurts human life as well, particularly the poor and the vulnerable. For this reason, Laudato Si is a landmark work of church teaching that brings together science, technology, and social action to deal with much more than just the environment. It seeks to create an integral ecology in which all that is sacred is considered and cherished. As Pope Francis writes, human beings too are creatures of this world. The urgent challenge to protect our common home includes a concern to bring the whole human family together to seek sustainable and integral development, for we know that things can change. So what is sustainable development? The concept of sustainable development has its roots in the distant past, stretching back at the danger of population growth in the late 1700. In the United States, the most powerful indictment of human action came from George Peggy's Marsh. He says, "Man is everywhere a disturbing agent. Wherever he places his foot, the harmonies of nature are turned to discords. Of all organic beings, man alone is to be regarded as essential a destructive power." The World Commission reported this concept in 1987 to the United Nations on Environment and Development, entitled Our Common Future. In view of this report, sustainable development, which should apply to all countries, involves economic and environmental changes that meet the needs of the present, especially of the world's poor, without jeopardizing the needs of the future. While the focus of sustainable development is on physical sustainability, there must also be a concern for equity within the current generation and for future generations. In other words, sustainable development is the ability to meet the needs of today's people and environment without compromising that of subsequent generations. When a program seeks to create sustainability, it aims to create an environment that can renew itself without damage to future stakeholders and without decreasing present quality of time. The working towards a green economy or sustainable development helps reduce poverty. It also sheds a brief light to improve poor people's access to a healthy and safe environment while increasing human security by preventing or resolving conflicts over land, food, water, and other natural resources. So how? The 3R approach. Reduce and reuse and recycle. Reduce means to minimize the amount of waste we create. Reuse refers to using items more than once. Recycle means putting a product to new use instead of throwing it away. Here I want to add another R from Laudato Si, which is rest. When we read the creation story, we know that on the seventh day, God rested from all his work. He commanded Israel to set aside each seventh day as a day of rest, a Sabbath. Similarly, every 7 years, sabbatical year was set aside for Israel, on complete rest for the land. Pope Francis emphasizing a rest for the land is essential. On Sunday, our participation in the Eucharist has special importance. Sunday, like the Jewish Sabbath, is meant to be a day which heals our relationship with God, with ourselves, with others, and with the world. Sunday is the day of the resurrection, the first day of the new creation whose first fruits are the Lord's risen humanity, the pledge of the final transfiguration of all created reality. Pope Francis brings this as a solution for recovery of the environment, where in this day people can rest and the environment can breathe and recover. Are we seeing something prophetic in the Pope's Sunday agenda? Do we know how this works? The global outbreak of coronavirus disease 2019 is affecting every part of human lives. Here we see a significant effect on the environment. The study indicates that the pandemic situation significantly improves air quality in different cities across the world, reduces GHG emission, lessens water pollution and noise, and reduces the pressure on the tourist destinations, which may assist with the restoration of the ecological system. In addition, there are also some negative consequences of COVID-19. Hence, the study also outlines possible ways to achieve long-term environmental benefits. It is expected that the proper implementation of the proposed strategies might be helpful for the global environment sustainability. Multilateral agreements. An interdependent world not only makes us more conscious of the negative effects of certain lifestyles and models of production and consumption, which affect us all. More importantly, it motivates us to ensure that solutions are proposed from a global perspective and not simply to defend the interest of few countries. Interdependence obliges us to think of one world with a common plan to find effective ways of dealing with the grave environmental and social problems worldwide. We know that technology based on the use of highly polluting fossil fuels, especially coal, but also oil, and to a lesser degree gas, needs to be progressively replaced without delay. Until greater progress is made in developing widely accessible sources of renewable energy, it is legitimate to choose the less harmful alternative or to find short-term solutions. Examples: the use of gasoline to power automobiles have finally led to the beginning of using hybrid automobiles, but there is also opposing environmentalism. Most generally, those interested in economic development have little patience for environment. A technological fix. Despite the negative impacts of technology on environment, a recent rise in global concern for climate change has led to the development of new environmental technology aiming to help solve some of the biggest environmental concerns that we face as a society through a shift towards a more sustainable, low-carbon economy. Environmental technology is also known as green or clean technology and refers to the development of new technologies which aim to conserve, monitor, or reduce the negative impact of technology on the environment and the consumption of resources. I would like to use the words of Pope Francis to end this report. Everything is interconnected, and this invites us to develop a spirituality of that global solidarity which flows from the mystery of the Trinity. I have a short video showing what we can do in our ordinary life to care for our common home.
Praise be to God. Praise God, Laudato Si, for all the animals, the birds and the trees. Praise God, Laudato Si, for He created you and me. Praise God, Laudato Si, for all the animals, the birds and the trees. Praise God, Laudato Si, for He created you and me. Papa Francis, us world citizens, not just Catholics, but all religions. We all share the same chromosome, so let's care for our common home. Praise God, love that don't see. For all the animals, the birds and the trees. Praise God, love that don't see. For He created you and me.
Creation is interconnected. Even the poor, the weak and rejected. Nature gives us for our needs, but not for endless greed.
Praise God, love that don't see. For all the animals, the birds and the trees. Praise God, love that don't see. For He created you and me.
For long we lived in a culture of waste, stripped the earth of its beauty and grace. Let's opt for growth that's ecological and be happy with little.
Let's join our hands to repair the damage, unite together and face the challenge. If Earth is laid to waste by us, then we too will turn to dust.